I needed to pivot. Maybe it's not so much of a pivot as an evolution, but I was used to doing business the old way, and that was great for the first 15 years of my business. And I started realizing that I needed to have an online presence.
What's up, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the 1004 show, episode 48. We're talking with Gary Plaag of Couragio Consulting, which is a group out of Williamsburg, Virginia. And what's cool about Couragio and Gary is they've figured out a way to really help those who know that they need to use communication skills in their business, but they might be a little bit afraid to do it. And so he really helps them get the courage, if you will. Couragio, Couragio is for courage. And it's cool because he's really able to help these businesses figure out ways to improve their presentation skills so that they can obviously grow their business. And so he's been doing it for about 20 years. We talk a little bit about the journey of how he has had to overcome a lot of changes in the economy over the years, and how this is really his second career because Gary is a little bit older of an entrepreneur. But it's really cool to see how he is innovating himself and really making sure that he stays afloat in the digital world. And so thank you for checking out today's episode. Again, it's with Gary Plaag of Couragio Consulting. And if you like it or you love the show, please give us a subscribe, a download, a like, share it with your friends, and appreciate your time. Or hit us up via email, zach@startwithhatch.com. Appreciate your time, and let's get into this episode. All right, we're here with Gary Plaag of Couragio Consulting. You can learn about them at couragio.com. Gary, what's going on?
Hey, not much. Thanks for interviewing me.
Absolutely. This is what you do for a living. You teach people, you coach them, you help them get better at their communication skills. So
Correct.
I'm expecting you to be the best that I've ever interviewed.
Could be a lofty expectation, but we will attempt to deliver.
I appreciate your honesty. So
I'll take note from you just so you know how you're doing as well.
That's what makes me nervous about this. So you've been in business 20 years. The world has changed. Tell me a little bit just about how you got started with Couragio.
Okay. I was an IT guy for 20 years, 19 and a half years before that, and was a programmer and analyst. Last 11 and a half years of that career, ran a corporate help desk in the DC area. It was about a 6-month burnout job, and I was there for 11 and a half years, which tells you how I ended up when I finally left. And I just cold turkey quit. One December of 97, walked into my boss and said, I'm done. I'm going off on my own. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's going to be different than this. And that's I'll tell you more about that in a second. But then moving ahead, I knew that I wanted to do something in this communication world. And so and the reason was because I had been on the speaking circuit at IT conferences for the past 10 years before I quit. And I was always invited back. It was a conference where you only got invited once, and I would get invited multiple times. And I wasn't the keynote speaker there, but I was a breakout sub-session speaker, had 3 or 4 sessions, an hour and a half each or something. And I would get people that would come to me during meals and off hours times, and they would say, wow, I really enjoyed your session. It was really engaging, really captivating, and I don't do that very well. Could you teach me and or my team how to do that? So I thought, well, I guess I could, and I would do little evening gigs in the DC area and help people with things, and they would give me a little $100 gift card to something, and it was all very, very, very much not a business because I was still working at the other place. So when I finally decided to leave the other place, the corporate world, I said, why don't I do this? Because this is what people seem to tell me that they want me to do, and they're asking me for my help, so I must be somewhat skilled at it, or they wouldn't be asking. So I hung up a shingle in January of '98 doing that, and had a couple of really great opportunities to work with some people. Remember, I have no clients because I have no reputation in this space. And if I was to do it again, I would have spent the year and a half to 2 years while I was still at the IT firm working on getting ready to, one foot in that shop, one foot in the new place, and then eventually step over full time. Well, who knew how to do that back then, right? It was the mid 90s. This is the world of do crazy things, and there's no planning, there's no incubators that I knew of, there's no, here's some help. It's really just a jump off the ledge and hope that something catches you. So I did that, and moving into the first year of what I did, you always talk about the hustle, and I was trying to keep my bills paid. And so I did every kind of odd job you can imagine. I sold flowers at a flower shop in the times when I wasn't doing this work, because I had friends in the networking, from my networking, who owned businesses, and they would let me work at off hours so I could continue paying my bills while I built this business. And then, and I just had crazy jobs that I eventually realized I didn't like doing those, but I did them anyway, because you have to do what you do.
It was like the gig economy before the gig economy. So you were doing Uber and ride sharing and renting out the home to your house, which is what it would be today. But now, or before, you were doing odds and end jobs, freelancing, selling flowers. Yeah.
Exactly. Writing articles for magazines, or that were not unread magazines, and hoping I got picked up and published, and you'd make $100, or selling flowers at $12 an hour when everybody else made $9 an hour, and because they liked me and I could sell flowers like nobody's business, because I was pleasant at the counter and could help people on the phone, and it was a lot of hard work, but I did what I had to do. I did interviews for some companies that were, some organizations that looked for candidates for nonprofit things, nonprofit leadership roles, and I would do interviews for them. And so I did that kind of stuff, but it was really odd jobs and exactly like that, just Ubering and freelancing to pay the bills. So then 2000 to 2001, I did a great thing. I was in the chamber up in Fairfax County, and some people in there said, hey, you need to get involved with Leadership Fairfax. So I applied to Leadership Fairfax and I got in. And there were 47 other people in my class. They were business owners. They were high-ranking government people. They were people in the nonprofit world. And I started to meet people who were really successful at their businesses and at what they were doing. And this gave me an audience of people who needed the services that I provided. And I believe that in the course of the next 2 years after doing Leadership Fairfax, people, and in Leadership Fairfax, they had gotten to know who I was. I always say that the key to success in business is not what you know, and it's not who you know. It's who knows you. Because people are only going to do business with you when they feel good about you and feel good about recommending you to people. So at the end of that year of 9 months of Leadership Fairfax, within the next 2 years, about half of my class hired me to do work in their companies. So that was a huge thing for me to really give me some lift and some credibility. And I met the right people, and I got some really good contracts with Fairfax County government. And then, so at the end of 2001, I decided to go back to school. So I realized that I had a bachelor's degree in government from William & Mary, but I didn't have an advanced degree, and I hadn't been in school for a while, and I needed to have some grounding in this communication field. Didn't think I needed didn't need a doctorate. I didn't want to teach at the university, but I wanted to have more credibility. So I went back to school. I applied at George Mason in Fairfax. I got in as a probationary student because my grades at William & Mary 20 some years before had been less than stellar. And
what was your GPA?
Oh, it might have been a 2.8 or a 2.9. And they were worried about me that, I might fail out of George Mason in this new communications program. So I went in and I had to get a C, in my first, at least no lower than a C in my first 2 classes if I wanted to stay. So I went in and the kind of cool thing was that my parents insisted on paying for school at George Mason. And they pulled me aside and said, we want to pay for this for you. And I said, well, I didn't ask you to do that. And they said, well, you've never asked for anything, so please let us do this. I said, well, okay. So I got in, did my first 2 classes in the first semester, and I got A's in both of them. And then I went through the next semester. So that took me so that was 2000, the winter of 2002. And then I went into the fall of 2002 and then the spring of 2003. And at the end of that spring semester, I had A's in all my classes. I took 2 classes each semester. And in that summer, they called me and said, we'd love to have you teach in the classroom.
This is just from a context standpoint. So this is after your 20 years in IT and after Lead Fairfax?
Correct.
Okay. So you're really getting into your second career at this point, if you will.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So they said, we'd like to have you teach in the classroom. So I said, well, okay. And I was flattered. You're honored, you're flattered. And they say, we have 2 sections of public speaking, one with technology, one not with technology. Would you take both of them? And of course I said, sure. Well, this is fatal error number 1, is that when you're going to teach 2 classes and there's 2 weeks before class starts and they use 2 different textbooks, guess what you've got to do in the next 2 weeks?
Read them?
The textbooks, exactly. And so I went into this. This was another jump feet first into this thing and not know exactly what's going on.
I'm seeing a trend with this, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Let me and I don't think I'm really a risk taker, but I think I've convinced myself over time that in fact I am pretty much a risk taker. So here I am in this university setting. I'm taking 2 classes. I'm teaching 2 classes every semester. I finally graduate May of 2004 with my master's in communication, and I end up continuing to teach there in the comm department at Mason through the fall of 2010. And I was teaching basic public speaking, and they would occasionally, I think 4 or 5 times, they threw me a 300 level business and professional communication. I loved doing all of that. I loved teaching. I loved sharing what I knew. I was growing a ton. I had all kinds of great contracts. And then 2008, what happens? Recession. Mm-hmm. And the craziest thing is that these clients that I had, who I'd done really great work for, this is a lesson of don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I had multiple clients, but they were multiple big clients. And you know what they said? They said, we can't have you anymore because we had to lay off 10 or 100 people or something, or we laid off 25 people, and we can't do any training because we feel guilty about doing training with a reduced staff, and we had to let people go. And I'm thinking, the right time to do training of the staff that you have, especially in communication skills, when you're depending on fewer people to sell your product, the good idea would be to have training now. But they wouldn't hear anything about it. So went into kind of a slump there and had to retool. And so decided I'm going to learn how to network. Because before I did a little bit of networking. And I'll tell you, a lesson that I learned early on in that networking career, back when I first joined the chamber, is I went to the Fairfax County Chamber. So let's say it was 98, 99. And I went to a networking evening event, and I came out in the parking lot about halfway through, and I was leaving. And there was another guy that I knew from the chamber who was well known in the chamber. And we're chatting in the parking lot. And he says, Gary, how's your networking going? And I said, I just really am miserable at these things. That I don't know people. I feel uncomfortable. It's really awkward. And so I just prefer not to go to them. And he says, I see. He says, when I hear people say that, you know what I say to myself? Good. That's more business for me. And so he says, have a nice evening, Gary. And he got in his car and drove away. And I drove home and I called that man everything but a human being on the way home in the car about how did he dare to talk to me like that? And
You
then
actually called him?
no, I
Like
just ran in my
speaking to
car
yourself. Okay.
to myself, calling him all kinds of ugly things. And then I stopped and I realized he's absolutely right. If I'm not going to go get the business, it's not going to come to me. I need to go get it. And so I really took a new focus on, and this anxiety about meeting people. The thing that I did is I went and got a job in '99 because I was nervous about this from the beginning. But in '99 I got a job as an usher and a ticket taker at the Kennedy Center Opera House. And in those jobs, I had to talk to people I did not know for 4 hours. I had to welcome them to the Kennedy Center. I had to look at their tickets, had to tell them which seats they had and where they were in the Opera House, had 2,200 seats in it. And doing that caused me to get over this anxiety and this fear of talking to people I didn't know.
Did you do it strategically, knowing to try and improve that, or did you just need a job? Like, what was?
Yeah, I did know that I needed a job. Remember, this is '99. I'm just out of this other career, and I'm doing odd jobs. And I had a friend that worked at the Kennedy Center, and he said, "Hey, we're looking for ushers." And I thought to myself, this would be a good thing for me to do, because I'm going to have to really stretch all these things that I'm nervous about. So it was a great thing. So yeah, it was fairly, I wouldn't say it was front of mind, but I would say that it was definitely, I definitely thought about it, that this would help me with this skill. So anyway, moving ahead, fast forward 2010, I quit teaching at Mason and really focused on the business because it wasn't great pay for an adjunct professor. And it was still in this recession and I needed to really retool. So I did that. 2014, and I get some good clients after that. And then 2014, I realized that Northern Virginia isn't where I'm happy. I've been there my whole life. I went to high school and everything there. I went to William and Mary for 4 years, and then I went back there and had these careers. And I realized I wanted to go somewhere else. So again, risk averse Gary, who's not really risk averse, I decide to move to a town 3 hours away where I know two people, one from a networking group I had in Northern Virginia, and one person from college who still lives in Gloucester. And I know no one else. So I moved to Williamsburg in December of 2014 and moved my business here and moved my household here. And I knew these two people, and I had to start over again. And talk about the hustle and having to really pull in on all of the skills I had learned, all of the ways that I knew to do business, and I've been working them. And this is a small town, and it's based on relationships and people and I know that I can't support myself just in Williamsburg. I have to look down the peninsula and really work from Richmond to Norfolk. I really have to become exposed to that whole area if I'm gonna, because I have a niche business. There's not enough business here in Williamsburg just to do that. Do I still have clients outside of this area? Absolutely. But my goal is to make more connections here.
And so Williamsburg is really a community of probably less than 50,000 people, maybe even less than that, way less than that. But it sits in the middle of Richmond, Virginia, and then the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, which are probably 1.5 million each. And so it's this little piece there. And so you had to rebuild that kind of network. And so what were some of the first things that you did in 2014 to do that?
I joined a community group. I joined Kiwanis, started to meet people. I joined the Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance. I just went to things and looked for things that I could be discovered in. Could I be available and where I would meet people? So I started to do that. Then there was a note came out from the director of the Launchpad, and Tim Ryan, and he said he was looking for people to be on this advisory committee for this program called 1 Million Cups. And I thought, oh, well, I don't know anybody, so why don't I go? I'll get to meet more people. And I have some experience doing leadership things and organizing things in my other parts of my life. So why don't I go do that? What do I have to lose? Nothing. What you miss 50% or 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So let me go take this shot, and I'm going to meet more business people. So I go and I meet Tim, and then I realize he's in this great place called the Launchpad.
Was the Launchpad open yet, or is it still in the?
This was the fall of 15.
Okay.
So they just had their grand opening. I had been a month, all of September. I was in Australia and New Zealand with a client. So I was back, and I saw this notice, and I said, I'm going to go. I called Tim, chatted with him. He said, yeah, come on by and check out where we are and what we do, and let's chat. So did that, and realized the Launchpad is a great place for me to meet people. And so we did the 1 Million Cups thing there on Wednesdays, and I started to meet more people. And I had office space over by the colonial part of Williamsburg, but the problem was that I was by myself, and I should have known from my time when I first opened an outside my home office in Northern Virginia. I was in 2011. I was in a lovely area. It had a little pond and this little cottage feel. All that was great, but I was by myself. I didn't have anyone to share ideas with. I didn't have anybody that I could walk next door to. I really thought I really excelled, even though I didn't have great grades in college. When I was at William & Mary, I loved the concept of dorm life, where you could walk down the hall and talk to somebody. You could walk to another dorm right next door and talk to somebody about a project or whatever. And so I saw the Launchpad as that opportunity to get to talk to people, share ideas, and because I don't know everything. I know only what I know. And that's a small piece of the world. And the possible things that you could know, it's just a little wedge that I do know. So I started hanging out at the Launchpad more. And it was really, really cool. And so this past January, I had met a bunch of people, and I realized that Tim had a great place here. And I got a lot out of Tim. Tim introduced me to the Rotary Club, where I'm a member now, and I've met more people that way. And so I still have a foot in Kiwanis, and I have a foot in Rotary, and they're in different cities. So I'm in Newport News Rotary Club and in Williamsburg Kiwanis Club, and I participate as much as I can in each. But I'm meeting more people, and I'm getting to know more people. And the most important thing is that they're getting to know me. Because again, business success is not based on what you know or who you know, but who knows you. So the more places that I could put myself where people could get to know me, besides just shaking my hand and getting a business card, the better success rate I would have. And so in January of this year, I moved into the Launchpad. And the reason I needed to come, the reason I realized that the Launchpad was important to me is because I needed to pivot. And maybe it's not so much of a pivot as an evolution, but I was used to doing business the old way, and that was great for the first 15 years of my business. And I started realizing that I needed to have an online presence, that I needed to have a website, not just for vetting me for credibility, but to actually advertise to people and have a presence on Twitter, on Facebook, not on Instagram yet, but just this whole social media thing was important to me. How to network and market to people through that medium, that was important to me, and I didn't know how to do it. So where's the best place to know how to do that? Tim knows how to do that, and from him I got introduced to you and other Martians, I call them, who are entrepreneurs who are trying to make it, and we need to have special places where we can go where people understand us. So that's why I'm here.
I've never been called a Martian, so I'm like, add that. Usually I get called the things that you called that guy in the car that one time. So let's talk about networking. I believe that most people incorrectly network, and then the results are subpar. What are the ways that you think that people should network, or the ways that you network to get the most bang for your buck?
I'm consistent about going to things and going to things where I'm going to see the same people, maybe not all the same people, but that I'm going to see people that I've seen before. Because remember, it's about them getting to know you. And I like to network. And so, for example, in the Rotary Club, we have a shrimp fest. That's a big fundraiser down in City Center, Newport News area. And so I've done that for 2 years now. And when you're working with people on a team and you're seeing the same people every week for lunch, they get to know who you are. When I go to an event, like a chamber event, an after hours or whatever, my goal is to not talk to the same people who I already know at those events. I say hello to them, and if I want to talk to them more, I have coffee or lunch with them. But to go and hang out with people that you already know, not beneficial. So networking in that sense is going with the goal of meeting at least 5 new people who you didn't know and making a connection with them. If it's a worthy connection, a worthwhile connection, then you want to reach out to them and get to know them better. Have a one-to-one with them, have coffee with them, do something with them so they get to know you better. But I don't do it under the guise of getting to know me better. I ask them if I can meet with them so I get to know them better, so that I can refer them to other people that I know. I want to better understand their business so I can connect them with other people. I think the mistake that people make when they network is that they go looking for stuff for them. It's very self-centered. And yes, you are in looking for things for you. But really, if I connect you with someone else, the two of you are going to remember, and it's a good connection, the two of you are going to remember that I connected you to. So now I got 2 people who know that I was a good guy and did a good thing and connected them. And they're going to feel a sense of obligation. How can I connect Gary for connecting me with this really great prospect that I have? So I think that we go into networking situations me, instead of, and that just reeks of desperation. And instead of me, how can I help you to connect to other people?
So really play a long game. And if you think about it, networking in the case that you're talking about is really a cold call where someone is like the internet provider saying, hey, buy my thing all day, me, instead of just saying, hey, I'm Zach Miller, would love to learn more about you. How do you basically said, if you understand that a conversation that you had is good, you then ask them to learn more about them at a later time, get coffee, etc. How do you kind of qualify that to know if someone was good or not? Is it by the title on their business card? Is it just through the conversation? How do you understand if someone is a good fit for you to take that next step with?
I judge it based on how the conversation goes. Is this person someone just on first blush, not how they look or anything like that, but I mean just the quality of the conversation? Are they insightful? Are they worldly enough? Are they somewhat educated about what they do? Are they pompous and arrogant? What are they? And I can tell that, you can tell that in the first initial conversation, a little bit about that. Am I willing then to introduce this person to somebody else that I know? Am I willing to risk my reputation on that? If the person is pompous and arrogant and really all about him or her, and I've done this with people. I've met people who say they're coaches, and I ask them about their coaching strategy, and they don't have one. And they clearly, I asked them about challenges they've had in that coaching arena. Tell me about some great successes you've had. Tell me about some challenges you've had. And if they can't really finger point any great successes, or they can't point to any challenges they had, then this person isn't authentic, because I know that I've had challenges. I haven't always done the right things.
So a challenge in their actual business, like, oh, I've struggled finding this. I've struggled as a business owner to do X, Y, Z, is what
Could
you're
be,
trying to get at. Okay.
could be, or I had a client one time, and we just didn't connect, and I wanted to help this person, and it wasn't going to work, and I tried for too long instead of cutting it off. And because that's what I would expect a good coach to say, in whatever discipline the coach is in. I would expect to hear something about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't keep taking this person's money for 2 years. I knew that after 10 visits, this person wasn't doing, or 5 visits, this client was the wrong client for me, so I fired the client. Oh, right. Am I willing to introduce this person to my network of people? Am I willing to do that? If I am, and I may not know enough, I've only talked to the person for 5 minutes, but am I willing to introduce this person to other people I know? If I am, then I'm going to say, I'm going to break off the conversation, and then I'm going to email the person and say, really enjoyed speaking with you last night or yesterday or this afternoon or whatever, and I would love to meet with you over coffee or lunch to learn more about you and your business and how I can refer you to other people.
I think introductions are important, referrals are important, but I think that too many overlook how important that relationship can be hurt if you make a bad introduction. And so about a year ago, I was at an event talking with some active military looking to get out, and they were going through some program. And some people that I was on a panel with were talking about how they just introduced people to anyone. And I was like, and I literally said this, and I know I got the frown. I said, I don't introduce anyone to anyone because my relationship with them is really important. If someone says that they would like to meet someone and I just meet them for the first time, and I'm willing to throw out all this credibility and say, hey, this person's good, I think you're making a really bad mistake, because what if that person ends up not being a good person? And so I like that you make sure that you have a relationship with someone before you kind of take that next step. So with Couragio, and you guys have been in business for 20 years this year?
This December will be 20 years, yeah.
And we're talking with Gary Plaag, who's the founder there. Couragio.com is the site. You guys can learn all about it in the show notes. When you're working with these people, teaching them how to improve their presentation skills, what are some of the best examples that you've seen that an individual can do to improve upon that?
Most people, or let's say many people, they're afraid. They're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of, I'm going to make a mistake. And I love this. I saw this the other day. It was a Brene Brown. I don't know if you've ever watched any of her things. She is a shame and vulnerability researcher. But one of the things that she said is that perfectionism is the shield that we carry around, thinking that it will. Perfection is the shield we carry around, thinking it will protect us from being hurt, but it protects us from being seen. And so people are afraid of being seen as they really are. And don't we just want people to be authentic and real when we see them share information with us? We look at these various speakers that are on big stages, and they're just human. They may be very polished at what they do, but they're human. They're real. They're authentic. The ones that we connect with are. And I think that in my work, the real goal is to help people to see that they can be themselves, and they don't have to be afraid, and they can try things that are new to them, and they can be authentic, and they can be real, and they can be vulnerable. Because a lot of people say, I don't want to be vulnerable, but I want to be creative. But creativity comes from vulnerability.
Sure.
If you be creative, and and innovative, you have to be vulnerable. And if you're afraid to be vulnerable, then we're not going to make it. So helping people to realize that they can be them in front of people sharing information. And if we have some things that are really awkward mannerisms or characteristics that are distractions, then let's take a look at those and let's talk about them and let's fix those, if you will. But really, let's be you. So my whole focus in helping people with these skills is to help them to be them in front of other people, to allow them to be seen and not be afraid.
I think all too often people try to be someone that they're not. And even now, people are starting to become transparent, but I feel that a lot of it is fake transparency, where they think that people are looking for them to be successful. And if they tell a story where they're making a certain amount of money, whether it's true or not, I think it's kind of like this false sense of where they are. One example could be someone talking about how much money that they made, but they're just talking top line revenue and not actual profit. And that profit could be very small. And so, I appreciate that our world is becoming more transparent. However, I believe that a lot of people are still misleading and are not telling the real stories. And so some of the things that we've done at Hatch over the years are tell us stories of when you're in the dumps, to be resilient. And I don't think there's enough about that talked about. Entrepreneurship and owning a business has become this buzzword where it's the sexy thing and everyone thinks it's great. And while that may be true, and there's a lot of features and benefits that are wonderful with that, there's still this world of it's difficult. And so how does someone tell that world to their community, if that's what the community is looking for, and to just start doing something like that, to be able to be courageous enough to tell their story, to be themselves? How could someone start? You're the guy who likes to jump both feet in. How could someone maybe incrementally put their feet in the water?
Right. It's a tough thing because the person that's doing it has to realize that when people know your story, you don't have to be afraid of them knowing your story. Mm. If you allow, a guy wrote a book years ago called "Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am?" I think he was a priest. His name was John Powell, I believe. And it's a little thin book. It's back in the 80s self-help craze. And he went out and interviewed people. And he said, I'm writing a book called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? Can you tell me why you're afraid to tell people who you are? And the first person says, absolutely. Is that what you want to know? And he says, that's the book. I want to know. And the first person said, I'm afraid to tell you who I am, because if I tell you who I am and you don't like me, that's all I have. So I'll tell you that I'm somebody else. If we acknowledge who we are, and if we're willing to share, I don't mean all of your dirty laundry, I don't mean all of your history, I mean just basic things that we can tell anyway. If you're willing to, if you let that out and we go, you don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to be afraid to try to hold that stuff in so nobody will find out. You can just tell, is this who I am? And that's okay. And you don't have to be afraid of it. But so many people are afraid that somebody's going to find out, and then it becomes even more intriguing to try to find out. Why don't you just be you?
Yeah, like what's going to happen? What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly. My analogy is, what I often think about is, if I meet you at a conference and you're the keynote speaker, and before the conference, before your keynote, I'm in the restroom with you, and we're chatting in the restroom, I feel like you're the real guy in the restroom. And that conversation we have about whatever, and then you come out and I don't even realize you're the keynote, and you come out and you get up on the stage and you do this keynote presentation for 45 minutes, and you are nothing like the guy I met in the bathroom, then I wonder why. Which is the real one? Was the one in the bathroom the fake, or is the one on the stage the fake? I don't know. If you're the same guy that I met in the restroom, who's on the stage doing the keynote, and you're just a little ratcheted up because you're on stage in front of 500 people, or your goal is to really inspire these people. And so your energy level is up, but you're still the same person that I saw in the restroom. Then I'm going to believe that's really you. And I think the world needs more of that, because as you say, I believe people are faking it a lot. They're being who they think you want them to be.
And then ultimately it comes out and it's not a good thing.
Right, because I'm going to see behind the curtain sometime, just like in The Wizard of Oz. I'm going to look behind the curtain and see who you really are. It's just like when the kid is at the puppet show and they're hand puppets, and his mother lets go of his hand. He walks around behind the stage, and he sees the people with puppets on their hands doing the show, and he realizes the puppets aren't magical anymore. You know, why are you doing a puppet show on stage? Right? Why don't you just be you on stage?
Yeah, it's so
disappointed when I see the real you isn't the same person who's on stage. This is a battle for me, and it's really a battle because people don't like to go there because it's scary. It's very scary. That's why the company's called Couragio Consulting. It's because we help people to not be afraid. And anyway, go ahead.
No, you go.
I think that this is a tough thing for people. And again, if we go back to that perfectionism thing, it's our fear that the world will see us for who we really are. So we hide behind perfectionism. We hide behind making it all exactly right. We hide behind not letting people see who we really are and how we really tell our story instead of being authentic.
I mean, I think for me, I embrace the struggles that I've gone through, and I tell them because I know that there are other people out there like me that may be interested in finding ways to get through that. What's interesting though is that I know it's not for everyone, right? And some people don't like. I think some people don't like my authenticity. If I said that right, I think people don't like me being authentic, and they want me to be someone else. And sometimes people would look at that as discouraged, as being discouraged. I look at it as saying, hey, like if people aren't liking what you're saying, that must mean that people are jealous of you, or it's not the message that they want. So if someone was going through that and started getting hate, let's call it, and I don't think I actually get hate in the sense of real hate, but maybe in the way that Taylor Swift calls it, haters gonna hate. What are some ways that people can get through those challenges when they are being authentic and they start having people criticize them?
I think it's a mind shift. It's instead of, I think that the reason that, and I've known you for a couple of years now, and I know that the way that you communicate, I know that you tell these stories about your life and where you've had hard things, and I do the same thing, and I tell people about struggles I've had, and my goal is for people to realize that they're not alone. But it's really hard when people are authentic and tell truthful stories like you and I do. You know why they become very afraid. They get very scared because this starts to really look like them, and they don't want to be seen that way. So that's why you get haters, because you know what? This is exactly what I look like. I mean, just go watch Dr. Phil or watch Dr. Phil sometime. And he's got somebody on there who everybody in the audience sees this person as a controlling megalomaniac. And whether it's a male or a husband or a wife, and they're controlling, and they do all these things, and they get very angry. And Dr. Phil is talking to them about it, and they get more and more angry because everyone can see what's real. And when you start to point out what's real, it scares people. They're going to see me. They're going to know me. They're going to, and that's, again, why am I afraid to tell you who I am? Because if I tell you who I am and you don't like me, it's all I have. So somebody has lived for 30 years, 20 years, 40 years with this view of themselves that they want people to see. They've manufactured this thing. I heard a guy one time speak about it being clay pot. It's a clay pot, and that you build that around you. And his analogy was, those little bonsai trees? Mm-hmm. They grow this tall? Mm-hmm. And he asked the audience, why do they grow that tall? And the reason, he said, if you took that, he says, because they're root bound. If you took that tree and planted it in a field, it'd grow 30 feet tall. But it's root bound because it's in a little tiny pot. So people that are hung up on perfectionism and how they want to be seen and all that stuff that's all artificial, they're in a little pot. And they're not going to grow until that pot gets broken. And so people like me, people like you in the business world who challenge people to break their pot so they can grow, we scare people. It's terrifying because I can't live in the same. Why do guys not go to the doctor? Because the doctor's going to tell you something. Men are worse about it. Women go to the doctor, but guys don't like to go because the doctor's going to find something. Especially the older we get, he or she's going to find something, going to tell us about it, and now we have to make a decision. If I don't know because I don't go, I don't have to make a decision. That alters my sense of reality that I've created. Again, the doctor breaks your pot. And that's why we don't go. Why would they? I have that same issue with people as clients. They don't come to me because they know that I'm going to break their pot. And they're going to be able to grow even more than they ever have. And this is terrifying.
They'd rather not admit the truth, basically.
Exactly. It's change. It's change hard for us to do.
What?
So let me hide behind perfectionism. Let me hide behind the way I've always done it. Let me hide behind I'm too old. I don't want to go through all the agony of changing. Okay, great. Then you're the wrong person for me. I can't make you do it. I really, the clients that come to me are people who trust me. We work in a safe environment where they can experiment and try things and not get hurt and start to realize that, wow, what I've been doing in the past isn't really as beneficial as it could be if I went this other way.
Well, I remember even just a few months ago, I was running some of the numbers and I thought there were one thing in my business. Then I really did give a deep dive and realized, oh, they're way worse than I thought on something specific. And I'll be transparent and say it was specific events for us. And so we were using events to feed towards our membership platform 1004. And what we recognized was that we were putting at least 6 months of time into our events and only getting so much percentage out. And so let's run the numbers real quick to make sense of it. So let's say we have an event and 30 people show up. Let's say we charge $30 for those tickets. It's basically $1,000 for those people to come to one of those events. Of those 30 people, less than 25% are actually our target customers for our platform, of which then a smaller percentage even actually join the membership platform. If we take that 6 months or more and the financial commitments towards that and try to acquire those members for 1004 at $30 a month and get them for at least 1 year, it's $11,000 worth of revenue and $10,000 of opportunity lost, basically, for every event that we were hosting and putting so much time into it. And so when you really start to deep dive into stuff, you realize, oh, wow, we either need to address this, delete it, cancel it, or really make sure that the time that we're spending on something is something that we can get the results that we need out of it. And ultimately, we've addressed it. We've tweaked what we're going to do so that we're not spending, and 6 months I think is actually on the low end of that. I think it actually could be up to 9 months of time for events instead of this other membership piece. And so it's interesting when you really take a deep dive into that. We're talking to Gary Plaag of, I said it wrong.
Plaag.
Gary Plaag of Couragio Consulting, Couragio.com. Gary, if someone was thinking about hiring a coach, why should they?
Because you can convince yourself, the mind's a terrible thing, right? We've heard that a commercial before. You can convince yourself that you are an absolute rock star, and you can also convince yourself that you're a train wreck. And that's usually the extremes we go to. I'm terrible, I'm awful, I never want to do this again, I hate it. Or I am so awesome, that I don't need anybody to tell me how to make it better because I'm really already awesome. Neither of those two are ever the case. Usually, I would say in 99% of the cases, everyone is somewhere between 30 and 70%. And you need a coach to tell you to help you with your mind to realize what's authentic, what's real, what's not. These are the skills that you have. These are the skills that you need to be even more effective. Let's build them. You don't learn to play tennis at a championship level by reading the tennis book. You don't learn how to play golf by reading the golf thing and watching the videos. You learn by having a coach who helps you and calls you out and holds you accountable and responsible for the things that you're going to do. I have a coach in my business. I have a business coach who I pay a monthly rate to help me to continue growing, or I won't, because I will let things take over for me and then I just become stagnant. So that's why you need a coach. You need someone to hold you accountable.
So something that I think is interesting, and I think this is probably I didn't expect to do this today. This is probably the first public way of me doing this. We, as Hatch, have decided basically to be a mobile business, to everyone work remotely. So today I'm working out of my house. Some of my team is working in Denver. Some of my team is working at co-working spaces across town. And what's interesting is that, maybe there's a demon in my mind that says, no, you need to have an office to be successful, or you need this to do that. And what I'm learning, and I'm just a couple of days into this, is that what I actually thought was true, is that all I need is this thing that I'm using right here and a computer, right? And everything else that people think is what something looks like, if it doesn't matter. It matters when you actually get to the root of what you need. And as long as I have internet and a computer and can talk to people, I'm going to be fine, right? And so I'm actually seeing more productivity out of the team too, because we're not confined to this specific place, right? And so for 5.5 years, we were at 111 Granby, and it was absolutely magical, and we were able to do a lot with it. But there were also some cons associated with it that didn't allow us to mobilize or become more global, because so many people thought that we were just these four walls. And I've been saying one thing, but I think actually maybe even doing another, where I'm like, no, Hatch is a mindset where it's not these four walls. And so now we can go up to the launch pad in Williamsburg and visit you, or go down to Virginia Beach, or travel to Denver, or be in San Francisco and display what we can do, and we can help that way. And it doesn't have to be for a couple of people in one specific area. And so I think it's important for people to recognize that just because someone says one thing doesn't mean that that's actually the answer. And so for years I've been saying I want to get out of this office, but I haven't done it. And so now we're finally out of it, and people are like, are you sad? No, I'm not. Like, I think this is a great move and will actually help grow the business into this global brand that I've wanted it to be, because we're not tied to something. And so often, I think what you were just saying is people are tied to something because they think it's what they need to do. It's the one extreme to the other, but really they're between 30 and 70, right? And so some people are like, oh my gosh, you need to have an office. My fiance was one of them, right? And I sit there and I go, I respect her for certain things, but in this case, I disagreed with her. A lot of my mentors actually said, hey, like, this is where you've been saying you want to go. You don't need this. And very few people have actually, that I respect and would ask for specific feedback from, were ones that were like, hey, I think that you need to have this physical space. And so it's just really interesting to deep dive, and I think that's where a coach can really help you get that information that you're looking for.
Yeah, I agree. And in your case, you broke a pot. You said,
Love
what?
It.
That space was a pot. That space on Granby Street was a pot, and you grew in there for a while, and then you finally had to break the pot and say, you know what? We're going to continue to be this little thing if we don't break the pot and move on to other things. And so, yeah, that whole pot analogy of breaking that clay pot and allowing yourself to grow it's so transferable to many, many things. Many, many things.
Absolutely love it. I appreciate your time today, Gary. People that are looking to find you, you can find them in the show notes, Couragio.com. Email, if they can email you, where do they email you?
Gary@Couragio.com.
Very good. And Couragio, real quick, how hard was it to come up with that company name?
Well, it used to be my name, my own name, Gary Plaag, presentation coaching or whatever, and it just wasn't right. So I talked with a friend, and he said, "Well, you need a name that's pretty cool, and let's figure it out. What is it that you do when you help people?" And I said, everybody tells me that I help them to not be afraid anymore. He said, "So you give them courage." I said, "Correct." And he said, "Well, why don't we make it a little bit exotic? So we'll just take courage, take the E off, and put an IO on the end. It's not an Italian word. It's not my last name. It's not a word in any language. But when you see it, it says courage first before you see the IO part. And so you get the idea. And then the logo is a lion head. Right. And so it's about being courageous in whatever you do. And the space that I'm interested in is the communication space. How you tell your story. If it's a job interview, if it's a keynote address, if it's a briefing at your company where you work, if it's being the president of some organization, whatever it is, how do we help you, or we can help you, to be courageous at expressing yourself?
Love it. Gary, appreciate your time. Couragio.com. A tool to help you be courageous in your business. Gary, appreciate your time.
Thanks for the time, Zach.
Absolutely.
Take care.